Good morning. Oh, there's some quieting. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Jack Catlin, and welcome to the Chicago Community Trust State of Community Breakfast. Thank you for being here. Before we get started, I wanted to recognize and thank the elected officials who have taken the time to be here with us this morning. Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle, City of Chicago Treasurer Kurt Summers, and State Representative from the 5th District, Juliana Stratton. I also want to recognize my fellow members of the Trust Executive Committee who are here present, and thank you very much for coming. Every year at State of Community, we invite you to take time out of your schedule to gather with us for a brief moment of shared reflection. We look at the conditions of our communities. We share stories about what the Trust is doing to inspire more generously and to improve the quality of life here in Chicago. And we consider how the Trust can best serve our region in the year ahead. Because that is what we do. As our region's community foundation, we are a connector and a convener. We connect generous donors with the causes they care about. We link nonprofits with the vital resources they need to fulfill their missions. And we serve as a platform for residents from across the region to come together and to make great things happen. We believe that what you do matters. And that's why we want to support you in creating even more positive change in our communities. By definition, a community foundation has a deep commitment to inclusion. I am pleased to share that due to the Trust's continued commitment to inclusion, and as a follow-up to ADA 25 Chicago, today's event was planned to be accessible to everyone, with and without disabilities. So let me highlight some of the accessibility features. The live captioning, which you see on the screens, make it possible for all of our attendees to fully experience and enjoy our speaking program. The captioning can also be seen by those of you watching via webcast. In addition, we have a sign language interpreter here with us this morning. The postcards at each table are also available in alternative format, with descriptions of the visual images on each card. And the room has been laid out with aisles to allow everyone to navigate the paths to the tables more easily. The Chicago Community Trust and our partners have a wealth of resources for how you can make your initiatives, programs, and facilities open and accessible for people with disabilities. Renewing the commitment, the Trust ADA Compliance Guide for Nonprofits, is available on the Trust website, or just Google Renewing the Commitment ADA. Please visit cct.org or ada25chicago.org to learn more. And please enjoy breakfast. Our program will begin shortly.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. For the past 2 years, in addition to my role as a member of the Trust Committee, I've enjoyed co-chairing the On the Table initiative. Thank you. I'm sure that many of the people in this room have participated in On the Table and joined us during a meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, late night desserts at Mary's house. If you haven't, we hope that you'll want to join us in the spring of this coming year. This past May, I will share with you more than 50,000 people within the city of Chicago and its suburbs participated in On the Table. Neighbors, The participants were comprised of neighbors, colleagues, friends, family, and even complete strangers, all of whom came together around the region with ideas to make it better. Every Chicago neighborhood, every suburban zip code, every county in the region was represented on the table. And that in and of itself is very phenomenal. The impact of On the Table continues to reverberate, and I want to share with you just a few anecdotals associated with that event. One of the participants was a self-described reluctant volunteer who worried about how much time it would take from her. She nonetheless signed up for On the Table, and as a result of the conversations that she had, she became an education ambassador for a women's group that deals with breast and ovarian cancer. This reluctant volunteer to date has helped more than 600 women. That's the power of On the Table. Further, On the Table incited a discussion in West Englewood, Chicago. For those of you who might not be familiar with that west side of Englewood, what you might know about it is what you might see is more incidents of gun violence than a focus on safe spaces. Through On the Table, a safe space was created for teens. It was born of someone who had the vision of creating a social hub at a barbershop. The local artist called it Barbershop at the Library. Now they're literally in a library cutting hair, having conversations. Teens and forward-thinking, clear-eyed adults talking about life and how to survive the rigors of a neighborhood and beyond surviving, thriving. That's the impact of On the Table. Away from the media glare, quietly, exceptionally, the Chicago Police Department has been extending On the Table, hosting regular mealtime discussions in neighborhoods with residents. This is officers and residents who obviously would not normally get together over dinner, talking about their concerns, talking about their lives, getting to know each other, building relationships. And as they build relationships, the seeds of trust are sown. That's the possibility associated with On the Table. The trust was so inspired by these stories that more than a year ago, we created the Acting Up Micro Grants Program. The idea there is to further generate ideas year-round through On the Table. Terry Mazzani will highlight several Acting Up recipients during his remarks, but I can tell you, pure inspiration is coming your way. It's amazing. On the Table has taught us that there is much more that unites us than divides us, and if ever there was a time for that message, it is now. While there are challenges in every neighborhood, opportunities as well. Every day there are people across the city and suburbs who wake up and ask and answer, how can I help? What can I do to build a smarter, stronger community? To help us further understand what unites us, the beauty of our neighborhoods, as well as the people who comprise them, the Trust enlisted the help of 5 esteemed photographers. The beautiful images are the ones that are rolling across the screen during the morning and will be doing so during the rest of today's event. The goal is to encapsulate through photography, prose, and poetry the stories and experiences shared throughout our community in the form of a local park, a neighborhood festival, a food pantry making a difference in others' lives and beyond. We're pleased today to offer you a limited edition of book, as well as that you'll get as you're on your way out, as well as a set of postcards showcasing the photographs from across the region. They too should serve as a reminder that we are what unites us. This work, titled We Are, is an expression of many things that make up our region's identity. It is an expression of its beauty as well as its tragedy. It's an expression of hope. It's an expression of hardship. It is who we are as well as who we aspire to be. I want to recognize the photographers who contributed to this project. Terry Evans. Terry uses both aerial ground photography to delve into intricate, complex relationships between land and people. Her work is exhibited in many museums around the country. Clayton Hawk. Clayton is a commercial and editorial photographer with a background in film production and editing. He has always been driven to create interesting and compelling visual stories. Carlos Javier Ortiz. Carlos is a director, cinematographer, and documentary photographer who focuses on urban life, gun violence, racism, poverty, and marginalized communities. His work exhibited nationally as well as internationally. Anjali Pinto. Anjali's colorful work is centered on capturing people, landscapes, and food. Her passion is travel, and she's inspired by to create images that celebrate both diversity and culture. John H. White, a Chicago legend. John received the Pulitzer Prize in photojournalism in 1982 for his excellence. He has received more than 300 awards internationally, nationally, and locally. These artists, some of whom are present today, would you please stand so that we can recognize you? Thank you. I'd also like to thank our partners for their work in developing these pieces and the accompanying prose and poetry. Galambos Associates and Kurish Ali Lansana. If you're present, please stand and also be recognized. Ladies and gentlemen, community voice matters. No matter what you hear presently, community voice matters. Our commitment as a community foundation is to keep listening to your voices and to use what we learn to shape how we support those who work to address the most pressing and compelling needs throughout our communities. Community voice matters.
There is poetry in every Chicago neighborhood. Poetry that tells us something about who we are, where we are from, and what we hope to be. Every day, in the corner office and at the corner store, in churches and community centers, on our streets and in our schools, we see the beauty and struggle, hope and hardship, the promise and potential of life in our region. From summer afternoons at a neighborhood festival to the fresh produce being harvested in a shared community garden. From the neighbor willing to lend a helping hand to everyone on the block and the local business that sponsors the Little League team. At parades and retirements, block parties, and the barber shop, we celebrate who we are, what makes us different, and what brings us together as a city.
We are neighbors.
We are beautiful.
We are guardians.
We are doers.
We are friends.
We are hopeful.
We are resilient.
We are passionate.
We are courageous.
We are community. We are the Chicago Community Trust.
Good morning. When the Chicago Community Trust was formed more than a century ago, it was based on the belief that we can all achieve more together than alone. As I look around the room, it's great to see leaders from across the region, all working in your own way to make a difference. The power of collective philanthropy is truly reflected here today. Bringing people together and using philanthropy to convene, connect, and champion individuals and organizations is still at the heart of the Trust's mission and work, even 101 years after its founding. However, just as important is having our work serve as a catalyst to create positive change. It's something that we take very seriously. This change would not be positive without the generosity of thousands of donors who have partnered with the Trust. We thank them for their enduring commitment to the community we all love and call home. The Trust Executive Committee recognizes that creating positive change can't be done sitting still. So we're evolving to meet the needs of donors and the nonprofit community. At last year's State of Community Address, Terry talked about the Trust's new strategic focus, specifically our work to lead change around some of the most pressing issues facing our community, to provide general operating funding to support our nonprofit partners, and to offer innovative ways for donors to support new ideas and solutions. To provide us with updates on these initiatives and more, I'd like to welcome the Chicago Community Trust President and CEO, Terry Mazzani.
Good morning, Chicago. Beautiful day. Linda, thank you for your leadership. And I want to thank all of the executive committee members who are here today, who continue the tradition of exemplary volunteer service on behalf of the residents of our region. Key to our impact is the staff of the Trust, who are dedicated to serving the philanthropic goals of Chicagoans, making smart use of endowed resources entrusted to the Trust, and broadly engaging our community in a unifying vision of our shared humanity and common good. I also want to pause and thank the staff here at the Hilton. I've become close friends with many of them, I think, seeing them at many events that all of you put on, and we are so fortunate to have their dedication and service in this hotel and throughout our community. Thank you. So as Linda said, a year ago we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the Chicago Community Trust and shared with you our plans and commitments to continue the record of contribution that is the hallmark of this great institution. In our centennial research, I came across a bit of history worth noting. It was almost exactly 100 years ago on December 15th, 1916, that the Trust hosted a luncheon at the Union League Club for the public introduction of the Chicago Community Trust. The luncheon featured Frederick Goff, who founded the first community foundation in 1914 in Cleveland, Ohio. Now, although I cannot verify this as a fact, I have it on good authority that at least one attendee at that luncheon bemoaned the fact, and I quote, "I bet the Trust will turn 100 before the Cubs win the World Series." So there you have it. 100 years ago, we gained from Cleveland the idea of a community foundation, and now a historic World Series championship. I cite this historical example to remind us that the trust exists within the context of the times, sometimes wildly exuberant and other times turbulent and troubled. Let's be mindful that it was just 6 months after the 1916 public launch of the trust that the United States entered World War I. Equally noteworthy, this war to end all wars ended on November 11th, 1918, a commemoration just recognized a few days ago. Why are these facts worth remembering? The end of World War I brought with it a flood of more than 6 million refugees and a very public backlash against immigrants. After the war, Chicago swelled to about 2.5 million people, of which only 44% were English-speaking. This prompted the Trust's Americanization Survey and the formation of an Americanization Council that would operate until, quote, the furor of prejudice had subsided and we were operating again on a higher level of mutual respect and good citizenship. In subsequent years, the Trust tackled issues of prenatal care with Jane Addams and Whole House. It also looked at the deplorable conditions of the Cook County Jail so that, quote, youthful delinquents and first offenders might be saved from becoming hardened criminals. And there was also a trust study of the care of children with disabilities, back then referred to as crippled children. In each of these are the antecedents of contemporary problems for which the Trust continues to work with donors and other stakeholders to find innovative solutions to alleviate suffering, protect the most vulnerable, and increase opportunity. We're able to do this because generations of donors have expressed their trust in this institution to do the right things, to help make our community a better place for all of us. Thanks to their generosity and belief in a better future, we're able to bring their philanthropic resources to bear on the challenges facing each generation. And I'm mindful that each of us has our own stories of family dealing with these challenges and uncertainties. In my case, my parents, children of immigrants, grew up in the Great Depression in the shadows of the shuttered steel mills on the banks of the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland. My father fought in World War II, and my mother raised a victory garden. I myself grew up during the Civil Rights Movement, the Vietnam War, and experienced the devastating shock of the assassinations of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Bobby Kennedy within the span of months. Yet in each era, we emerged stronger and better. Today we face new challenges and uncertainties, and what matters more now than ever is that we come together as one Chicago, a city that's unafraid of addressing the most challenging and complex problems and respectful of the humanity of each of our neighbors. The Trust is uniquely positioned to bring all stakeholders, nonprofits, donors, civic leadership, business, residents together in the interest of doing what's best for the collective good of Chicago. With that said, our purpose today is to celebrate the beautiful diversity of our communities, our city, and our regions. Every year, we invite you to gather together with us for what we call the Trust State of Community Address. Why do we do this? Our mission calls us to honestly reflect on the reality of our fellow residents. Are we thriving or not? Is opportunity abundant and fair or not? The Trust mission also compels us to reflect on the work of philanthropy, individuals and organizations making good things happen. Our ultimate goal today is for each of you to walk out of this room inspired to do more together to fulfill the promise of this city and the people who live here today. This is a day of optimism and hope. We cannot pretend that our great city does not face challenges. Our economy was dealt a staggering blow, first by the foreclosure crisis in 2006, immediately followed by the Great Recession. A decade into recovery, we have yet to perform at the level we know Chicago is capable of. As our colleagues at the Voorhees Center have shared with us, the gap between our most privileged and our most vulnerable residents continues to widen. Some neighborhoods flourish, while others are being hollowed out. Tragically, the ongoing loss of human life has made this year the city's deadliest in decades, and our community is still struggling with issues of public faith and trust in government. But Chicago did not earn the title of the great American city by folding in the face of adversity. This is a city that gains its strength from the challenges it faces and has the track record to prove it. What is becoming more and more evident is that residents and community organizations are stepping in and stepping up to take back responsibility for their lives and their communities. That's what we heard overwhelmingly at this year's On the Table. And I know many of you took part in the day's conversations, and I thank you for making your voices heard. While people are dissatisfied with the state of their community, they are also hopeful and feel that they can indeed make a difference. And that is what we see in Chicago's neighborhoods today. The seeds of hope and determination taking root and sprouting green shoots of education attainment, community reinvestment, and new opportunities. We see a very real and palpable energy and dynamism in our neighborhoods that seems contagious and inspiring. That is the headline for this year. We see David Doig leading a remarkable renaissance in Pullman, resulting in massive reinvestment in the reinvigoration of historic properties with the National Park designation. Theaster Gates leading in the role of artist turned master developer, demonstrating the power of a circular economy that turns liabilities into assets, from reclaiming the Stony Island Bank from the wrecking ball to reclaiming lives from the crisis of mass incarceration. Similarly, Joel Hammernick leads Sunshine Gospel Ministries, Sunshine Enterprises, to provide business education and coaching for low-income entrepreneurs throughout Chicago's South Side, creating jobs and economic opportunity for low-income families and neighborhoods. After 4 years, nearly half of their graduates have started businesses. We see Doug Lowe purchasing and repurposing a shuttered school in South Austin. The most violent of Chicago's neighborhoods has now become a haven for youth served by his Kids Express, with the mission to change neighborhoods, as they say, one child at a time. Robin Carroll in Carl launching I Grow Chicago in Inglewood and building the Peace House. Yes, indeed. Building the Peace House through nothing but sweat equity. For the first time in a long time, children and young adults have a safe place to play and a space to dream. And Reverend Otis Monroe leading the Monroe Foundation to help reinvest in these communities. Derek Brown, a former vice lord, founding Boxing Out Negativity to keep children out of harm's way in North Lawndale, and the work of his close friend, Reverend Robin Hood, who has dedicated his ministry to stopping the violence. And of course, Brenda Palm's barber with North Lawndale Employment Network, providing a U-turn for those rebuilding their lives. But wait, there's more. Marcinia Richards, founder of Fierce Women of Faith, I love the name of that organization, Fierce Women of Faith, has created an interfaith coalition of women committed to increasing peace in communities through advocacy, training, and partnerships. Her goal next year is to host 77 on-the-table conversations with women, one in each Chicago neighborhood. And the Wings organization, Women in Need Growing Stronger, under the leadership of Rebecca Darr, has built in Inglewood, Chicago's first domestic violence safe house in decades. The most touching part of my recent tour at Wings was a glimpse into what they call the birthday room. It's a large closet stocked floor to ceiling with every type of toy imaginable so that any child who happens to be living there on his or her birthday is able to experience that joy of a birthday party showered with love and affection. A number of the leaders and organizations I just mentioned are in the room this morning, and I'd appreciate if you would stand so we could recognize your efforts. All right, Carl, I got you. Carl is amazing. So let's think about these stories and what they all have in common. There's something we can learn from that. They all have in common proximity. Proximity. We are successful when we are connected with each other, when we listen and work together. To create more opportunities, we must be proximate to those without opportunity. To this very point, we see the foundation community leaning in and redoubling our commitment to not just fund solutions, but to be part of the solution. There is a group of 20 funders working together to help restore trust and legitimacy of law enforcement by ensuring the fair and inclusive implementation of the recommendations from the Police Accountability Task Force. Together, we are providing vital funding to 11 community organizations that are hosting conversations this month and next to engage residents block by block to shape the policies, culture, and practices of policing in our city. Most recently, a number of these funders, including the MacArthur Foundation, Joyce, McCormick, Woods Fund, and Polk Brothers, responded at record speed to the community call for resources in anticipation of violence over the Labor Day weekend. Together, we supplied $500,000 to 72 organizations for community events, reclaiming safe spaces for residents, all in the span of just 10 days. But the most meaningful benefit was forging new relationships between community groups and our foundations. Building on these accomplishments, we continue to work in collaboration to make Chicago a fair, equitable, and inclusive city. For the trust part, this has been a year of transformation, beginning with the announcement of general operating grants, we call them GO grants, to support anchor organizations that are delivering essential services to residents and communities. In the face of funding uncertainties and escalating demands on the frontline nonprofits, we recognize the need to simplify our grant application process and provide a measure of stability in an otherwise chaotic world. 1 year later, we have made 285 general operating grants totaling over $16 million. Through GO grants, we have also organized subject matter cohorts that create shared methods for measuring impact and work together to advance policy and systems reform. We are also focused on creating conditions for a sustainable and inclusive community, and in many cases, we are doing this by partnering with donors to bring innovative solutions to long-standing challenges. For example, in partnership with the Searle Funds at the Chicago Community Trust, we launched the Food to Market Challenge, our first ever prize philanthropy initiative. The challenge, reimagine the supply chain so that more locally sourced food is available at your local grocery store. The winner, Team Leverage, received the $500,000 prize to connect farms to table through the distribution systems of the Chicago Public Schools in a very innovative partnership. We also launched a partnership with the City and Metropolitan Planning Council to create the Great Rivers Project, which can be thought of as a metaphor for our times. What was once viewed as a liability for our city, our polluted rivers, is being transformed into a major asset that forms the spine of a livable city. And we are working with successful entrepreneur Bob Crawford in partnership with entrepreneurship programs hosted by organizations like Bethel New Life and the Resurrection Project to identify and fund promising business startups to revitalize neighborhood economies and create jobs. To meet the need for investment capital in our most under-resourced communities, we are partnering with MacArthur and Calvert Foundations to launch Benefit Chicago, our high-impact investing initiative. Thanks to On the Table, civic engagement has become core to who we are. And this year, as Mary said earlier, the Trust added a bit of rocket fuel to On the Table. We created the Acting Up Awards to fund great ideas pitched in 2-minute videos. No piece of paper moved across the transom there. It was all video submissions. We were deluged by more than 400 applicants and were able to fund 72. Some of the awards we supported included Open, Honest, Proud, a group seeking to destigmatize mental health. Students at North Lawndale High School who organized a youth summit, a couch tour to engage and serve homeless youth, and the printing costs for a coloring book designed by a 6th grade class to help adults more effectively counsel abused youth. Based on our experience, there is a clear desire from residents to have their voices heard and for their voices to matter. In response, we have started a new practice for civic engagement called social labs. Social labs use human-centered design to tackle complex social challenges. We've begun this work with 3 neighborhoods, Grand Boulevard, Oakland, and Douglas Park, to address the very important challenge: how do we create more resilient livelihoods for young people? Why a new approach? To make real progress, we must embrace complexity and a long view. And we need every stakeholder at the table working together, building relationships. Social labs were created in response to this idea. In a recent New York Times op-ed, the Dalai Lama and co-author Arthur Brooks of the American Enterprise Institute defined the problem as follows, quote, "It is the growing number of people who feel they are no longer useful, no longer needed, no longer one with their societies." Their advice for how to respond? They say, the first answer is not systematic, it's personal. Everyone has something valuable to share. We should start each day by consciously asking ourselves, what can I do today to appreciate what others offer me? Each of us has the responsibility to make this a habit, but those in positions of responsibility have a special opportunity to expand inclusion and build societies that truly need everyone. What does this mean to the Trust? How do we think about our role and contributions? We are committed to creating a more inclusive community. At our core, we seek to connect people power with institutional power, human capital with financial capital. This is not an either or, but a both together. Our work begins by inviting those typically not at the table to the table. Our experience is that those who have been excluded have the deep experience, wisdom, and community-validated leadership to make a difference. When we listen and learn from each other, when we imagine and create together, we connect people with people, and the power of creativity and new ideas is channeled to where it matters most. The result, we see each other through new eyes and appreciate our shared humanity. For all of this optimism and evidence of progress, what still lies ahead is the challenge of racism in our quest to bring about conditions for a just, fair, equitable, and inclusive community. For the third year in a row, we've seen racial equity emerge as the top issue of concern during the on-the-table conversations. Last year on the stage, I stated that as a community, we can no longer kick the can of racism down the road, leaving it to another generation to confront. If we do this, we are complicit and acquiesce to the unfairness and inequity based on racial difference. While clearly this history is not unique to Chicago, we have the opportunity to set our city apart by making a civic commitment to address this legacy head-on. The Chicago Community Trust seeks first to lead by example. For more than a decade, we have championed diversity and inclusion within our institution and through our actions, but we must do more. Next spring, we will sharpen the focus of On the Table by creating space for residents to deepen their exploration of racial equity. And yet, even though this issue is a leading theme every year, the dialogue will not be easy. We have heard from many that deeper conversations about race make them uncomfortable, make us uncomfortable. Unfortunately, that will not change as long as we shy away from this dialogue. To be successful, our first step is to commit to being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Yes, we may say the wrong things. Yes, we will tap emotions born of bitter experience that well up unexpectedly, but necessarily. But we can work our way through this discomfort and discover that by having honest conversations, we actually better understand one another, come to value each other as fellow human beings. This is a risk worth taking. What do we have to lose compared to what we have to gain? We recognize that this is just a first step on a longer journey, but it is the most important step to take. With that said, we share with you today a gift of our diversity and humanity, our hopes and our dreams. The 5 renowned photographers reflecting back to us who we are, inspiring us to embrace diversity as the wellspring of our strength. As we approach the holiday season and the giving season, I encourage you to think about the needs of our fellow residents. Most of us in this room have the good fortune to enjoy a measure of comfort in our daily lives. Many others in our city do not. We have much to give, and I ask that each of us do what we can to help lighten the burdens of others. There is a saying, if one lights a fire for others, it will also brighten one's own way. In closing, I am mindful of the approaching 100th anniversary of the birth of poet Gwendolyn Brooks, a true Chicago treasure. I've taken liberties with one of her iconic poems, We Real Cool, that reflects my sense of optimism. We real cool, we ace school, we work late, we fight hate. We shine sun, we are one, we jazz June, we thrive soon. Thank you for joining us today, because now, more than ever, what you do matters.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lou Nieto. I'm a member of the Trust Executive Committee and also a proud White Sox fan. Thank you, Terry, for that inspiring address. It makes me proud to be associated with the Trust. It's a wonderful organization. And thanks to all of you for joining us this morning. My fellow executive committee members and I recognize the challenge ahead of us in building a more inclusive, more equitable Chicago is vast and complex, but we also take inspiration from what we've heard from so many of you. Your passion, your commitment to breaking down barriers and opening up opportunity for more of our fellow residents is inspiring. We believe that together we can transform our region. Our board embraces this challenge, and we invite all of you to join us. We leave you today with two gifts that Mary mentioned earlier that celebrate the strength and diversity and the unity of our community. First, as Mary mentioned, there are the postcards. If you haven't looked at them yet on your table, please, we encourage you to take them with you. And secondly, as you leave, Mary also mentioned take a copy of the We Are photography collection. The Trust has printed a run of these books, so please make sure you claim yours while they're still available. And we'll be handing them out as you exit through the ballroom. Finally, core to our mission is inspiring philanthropy. Chicago has a proud tradition of philanthropy, acts small and large that collectively improve the quality of life and opportunity for all. As a final tribute to our 100th anniversary, the Trust commissioned a documentary produced by Curtis Productions that highlights the spirit of philanthropy in our region. This documentary, entitled What You Do Matters, will premiere on WTTW on Monday, November 21st at 9 p.m. I'd encourage you to set your DVRs or watch along with your family, friends, and neighbors. Thank you again for joining us this morning. We're deeply appreciative of all you do to help our region thrive. Have a great day.